Chapter 6. To the Rescue. As they walked the Dearleys home, Pungo said to Mrs. "Did you hear who owns the house where the puppies are imprisoned?" Mrs. said, "No, Pungo. I'm afraid I missed many things the Great Dane barked." "I will tell you everything later," said Pungo. He was faced with a problem. He now knew that his terrible suspicions were justified, and it was time Mrs. learned the truth. But if he told her before dinner, she might lose her appetite, and if he told her afterwards, she might lose her dinner. So still he said nothing. And he made her eat every crumb of dinner, and then join him in asking for more, which the nannies gave with delight. "It may be a long time before we get another meal," he explained. While the nannies fed the Dearleys, the dogs made their plans. Perdita had at once offered to come to Suffolk with them. But you are still much too delicate for the journey, dear Perdita," said Mrs. "Besides, what could you do?" "I could wash the puppies," said Perdita. Both Pungo and Mrs. then said they knew Perdita was a beautiful puppy washer, but her job must be to comfort the Dearleys, and she felt that herself. "If only we could make them understand why we are leaving them," said Mrs. sadly. "If we could do that, we shouldn't have to leave them," said Pungo. "They would drive us to Suffolk in the car and send the police." "Oh, let us have one more try to speak their language," said Mrs. The Dearleys were sitting by the fire in the big white drawing room. They welcomed the two dogs and offered them the sofa, but Pungo and Mrs. had no wish for a comfortable nap. They stood together, looking imploringly at the Dearleys. Then Pungo barked gently, "Woof, woof, woof-ook!" Mr. Dearley patted him but understood nothing. Then Mrs. tried, "Woof, woof, woof-ook!" "Are you telling us the puppies are in Suffolk?" said Mrs. Dearley. The dogs wagged their tails wildly. But Mrs. Dearley was only joking. It was hopeless, and the dogs knew it always would be. Dogs can never speak the language of humans, and humans can never speak the language of dogs. But many dogs can understand almost every word humans say, while humans seldom learn to recognize more than half a dozen barks, if that. And barks are only a small part of the dog language. A wagging tail can mean so many things. Humans know that it means a dog is pleased, but not what a dog is saying about his pleasedness. Really, it is very clever of humans to understand a wagging tail at all, as they have no tails of their own. Then there are the snufflings and sniffings, the pricking of ears, all meaning different things, and many, many words are expressed by a dog's ears. It was with their eyes that Pungo and Mrs. spoke most that evening, for they knew the Dearleys could at least understand one eye word. That word was love. And the dogs said it again and again. "They're asking us to find their puppies. I know they are," said Mrs. Dearley, never guessing that, as well as declaring their love, the dogs were saying, "We are going to find the puppies. Please forgive us for leaving you. Please have faith in our safe return." At 11 o'clock, the dogs gave Mrs. Dearley's hand one last kiss, and took Mr. Daly out for his last run. Perdita joined them for this. She had spent the evening with the nannies, feeling that Pungo and Mrs. might wish to be alone with their pets. Then all three dogs went to their baskets in the warm kitchen, and the house settled for the night. But it did not settle for long. Shortly before midnight, Pungo and Mrs. got up, ate some biscuits they had hidden, and took long drinks of water. Then they said a loving goodbye to Perdita, who was in tears, nosed open a window at the back of the house, and got out into the mews. They knew they could not open the gate at the top of the area steps. Carefully, they nosed the window shut so that Perdita would not get a chill, and then went around to the area railings to give her one last smile. Dogs smile in various ways. Pungo and Mrs. smiled by wrinkling their noses. She was there at the kitchen window, bravely trying to wag her tail. Beyond Perdita, Mrs. could see the three cushioned baskets in the rosy glow from the fire. She thought of the many peaceful nights she had spent in hers, in the happy days when the dog could fall asleep looking forward to breakfast. Poor Mrs. Of course she loved Pungo, the puppies, the Dalys, and the nannies, and dear, kind Perdita, best of everything in the world. But she also loved her creature comforts. Never had her home seemed so dear to her as now when she was leaving it for a dangerous, unknown world. And it was such a cold world. The night was fine, the stars were brilliant, but the wind was keen. If only she could have brought her beautiful blue coat, now hanging on a peg in the warm kitchen. Pungo saw her shiver. It is a hard thing for a loving husband to see his wife shiver. "Are you cold, Mrs.?" he asked anxiously. "No, Pungo," said Mrs., still shivering. "I am," said Pungo untruthfully, "but I shall soon warm up." He tail-wagged goodbye to Perdita, then started off briskly along the outer circle, looking very spirited. Mrs. kept pace with him, but after its last wag to Perdita, her tail went down. After a few minutes, Pungo said, "Are you warmer now, Mrs.?" "Yes, Pungo," said Mrs., still shivering, and still her tail was down. Pungo knew that if he could not cheer her up, she would never be able to face the hardships that lay ahead, and he thought he could do with some cheering up himself. So he began a little speech, intended to give them both courage. "I sometimes think," he said, "that you and I have become a little pampered. Well, pampering does good dogs no harm, provided they don't come to depend on it. If they do, they become old before their time. We should never lose our liking for adventure, never forget our wild ancestry." They were then passing the zoo. "Oh, I know we are worried about the puppies, but the more we worry, the less we shall be able to help them. We must be brave. We must even be gay. We must know we cannot fail. Are you warmer now, Mrs.?" "Yes, Pungo," said Mrs., but still she shivered and still her tail drooped. They were now nearly at the bridge which leads from the outer circle towards Camden Town. "Stop for a moment," said Pungo, and he turned and looked back along the curve of the circle. No car was in sight. No light was in any window. The lampposts were like sentinels guarding the sleeping park. "Think of the day when we come back with 15 puppies running behind us," said Pungo. "Oh, Pungo, Are you sure? Absolutely sure, said Pungo. Are you a little warmer now, dear Mrs.? Yes, Pungo. And this, said Mrs., and this time it is true. Then onwards to Suffolk, said Pungo. And as they ran towards the bridge, Mrs. carried her tail as high as his. Not too high, Mrs. dear, said Pungo. Let our hearts be gay, but not our tails. For when a Dalmatian's tail is curled high over the back, it is called a gay tail, and is a bad fault. Mrs. was still laughing at this little joke when her heart gave a wild flutter. Coming towards them was a policeman. Instantly, Pungo led the way into a back street, and they were soon safely out of the policeman's sight. But seeing him had reminded Mrs. of something. Oh, Pungo, she wailed. We are illegal. We are out without our collars. And a good thing, too, said Pungo, for a dog can be grabbed by the collar. But I do wish we could have brought your coat. He had noticed that she was shivering again, though this time it was because she had been scared by the policeman. I don't, said Mrs. bravely. For if I wore a coat, how should I know how cold the puppies were? They have no coats. Oh, Pungo, how can they make the journey from Suffolk in such wintry weather? Suppose it snows. They may not have to make the journey yet, said Pungo. Mrs. stared in astonishment. But we must get them back quickly, or the dog thieves will sell them. Nothing will happen to them yet, said Pungo. And now he knew it was time to tell his wife the truth. Let's rest a moment, he said, and led Mrs. into the shelter of a doorway. Then he went on gently. Dear Mrs., our puppies were not stolen by ordinary dog thieves. Try not to be too frightened. Remember, we are going to rescue them. Our puppies were stolen by Cruella de Vil's orders, so that she can have their skins made into a fur coat. Oh, Mrs., be brave. Mrs. had collapsed. She lay on the doorstep panting, her eyes full of horror. But it will be all right, dear Mrs. They will be safe for months yet. They are much too small to be used for a fur coat yet. Mrs. shuddered. Then she struggled to her feet. I will go back, she cried. I will go back and tear Cruella de Vil to pieces. That would do no good at all, said Pungo firmly. We must rescue the puppies first and think of our revenge later. On to Suffolk. On to Suffolk, then, said Mrs., staggering along on shaky legs. But we shall come back, Cruella de Vil. Soon Mrs. began to feel better, for Pungo made her see that puppies whose skins were wanted for a fur coat would be well fed and well taken care of and kept together. Ordinary dog thieves might have sold them already, and to different people. She asked him many questions, and he told of his early suspicions, how he had suddenly recalled the evening they had first seen Cruella and sat under the piano in the red drawing-room. She said we would make enchanting fur coats, Mrs. For spring wear, over a black suit, said Mrs., remembering. And she did take a lot of interest in the puppies. And she kept Nanny Cook talking while they were stolen, said Pungo. But I wasn't quite sure until this evening at the twilight barking. You didn't hear as much as I did, Mrs. Our puppies are at Hell Hall, the ancestral home of the de Vils. And he knew, though he kept this from Mrs., that the SOS on the old bone meant, Save our skins.